I hope you had a great weekend. Did you have a good weekend, Pete?
Yes, I did. Working on the Jeep.
Good, good. Jeep's coming along. We'll keep you posted. March 27. I see congratulations to the Labor Party in New South Wales. I see they won the election. And by a handsome margin, too. They'll be able to govern in their own right. Says a little bit about some of the pundits who were talking about hung parliaments and all the rest. They don't know. No, they don't. And I think I was wrong when I said for the first time on mainland Australia, every government was Labor. There was a brief moment, I think back in 2011, something like that, when something similar briefly happened. Poor old Tasmania sits down there. Can you imagine that poor guy at Premier's conferences? He's going to feel a bit lonely. Oh dear. Before we get on to the news of the day or the interesting topics that might get you snapping, some of the birthdays. March 27, Sun Records. Oh golly, Sun Records, which really did kind of start it all off. A guy called Sam Phillips was behind Sun Records in Memphis. He began releasing records this day, March 27, 1952. Was the day, it doesn't give me a note here as to what that first record was, but that was the beginning of, rock and roll and popular music, if I could put it that way. If ever you've wondered who invented or patented the shoelace, I know it probably hasn't crossed your mind, but the modern shoelace with an eyelet was patented in England on this day in 1790 by someone called Harvey Kennedy. Happy birthday to the shoelace. The things we take for granted. Oh, and the wonderful Henry Royce, English industrialist and automobile founder, Rolls-Royce, born in England. He died in 1933, but he was born on this day in 1863. Dudley Moore, the guy, Dudley Moore, who was the bloke he used to perform with? Peter Cook? Yeah, Peter Cook. Pete and Dud. They used to call him the sex thimble. I think that was after he starred with Bo Derek in that 10 movie. But anyway, 2002, Dudley Moore, English comic. He was in 10, Arthur, Bedazzled, jazz pianist, composer. He dies of pneumonia at 66, very young. The Battle of the 30, which I had never heard of before, 1351, the Battle of the 30. 30 English and 30 Briton knights and squires square off using swords, maces, lance and dagger. Considered to be one of the most chivalrous battles in history. The Battle of the 30. Patti Smith Hill. Now you might know Patti Smith Hill. You do inadvertently. Do you know who she is, Pete? Patti Smith Hill, American composer and teacher and a songwriter, most remembered for having written Happy Birthday to You. Golly, born in Anchorage, Kentucky. She died in 1946, but born this day in 1868. And I think people still have to pay royalties when they play or sing Happy Birthday, which is, how would you track that down? How would you keep track of that, I wonder? Michael York, British actor, 1942. He was born in Buckinghamshire. 1968, Yuri Gagarin, the Russian cosmonaut, first man into space. The spaceship was Vostok 1, by the way, but that's not the story. He dies on this day at the age of 34 in a light plane crash. Can you imagine going through all of that and dying in a light plane crash? 1968 it was. Gloria Swanson, American actress, 1899 she was born. Sunset Boulevard, Queen Kelly, producer, actress, born Chicago, died in 1983. Milton Berle, beloved Uncle Milty, they used to call him, Uncle Milty. Mr. Television, he dies at the age of 93. Milton Berle, 2002. And Quentin Tarantino, American director and screenwriter, Pulp Fiction, born in Knoxville, Tennessee. He specialized in the most violent movies. He liked doing westerns too. Did a sort of a parody on the Magnificent Seven called the Horrible Eight or Terrible Eight or something. Did you ever see that?
Yes.
Oh,
Polite, was it?
terrible. Can't remember who was in it. But it was a really violent movie. And one more, the first true pirate radio station, 1964, Radio Caroline, opens in England. It also was a beginning of a revolution in the pop music business, along with Sun Records, back in the early days. Now, if you're a new podcast listener, welcome. If you want to see what the show looks like and you're listening to it as a podcast, you can always just go to Facebook. Jeremy Cordeau's Court of Public Opinion is how you find it. Welcome to everybody. We do a different broadcast every single day, Monday to Friday. And Pete, I think you post it at 9 o'clock in the morning, don't you? But you can view it anytime you like, anywhere you like. They only discovered it a month ago. It was a speck, tiny, tiny speck in space. But it could destroy a city the size of Sydney. An asteroid, 2023 DZ2, they call it. It passed between the Earth and the Moon a few hours ago, travelling at 17,000 miles an hour. Somewhere between 40 and 90, depending on where you measure it. How would they do that? How would they measure something travelling at 17,000 miles an hour? Anyway, they did apparently. It's somewhere between 40 and 90 metres across. So it's not all that big. Anyway, it missed us this time, but it'll be back in 10 years to have another go. We'll see. Interesting little statistic I saw. 500,000 young people. By young people, I mean between the ages of 18 and 24. 500,000 still live at home. I don't know. I couldn't wait to get out of home. Pete, did you get out of home fast or hang around?
Early 20s.
Yeah, and I think I was about 18 or 19. But, you know, you don't want to reach the point where you sort of wear out your welcome. I mean, your mother will wrap your lunch in a road map, you know. You'll come home and find that she's changed the locks. Things like that. Dear, oh dear. You heard about the strike at the ABC, I guess. And the funny thing was that the people had to be bussed in from home because so many people work at home. They had to be bussed in, brought into the building so they could be pictured walking out. What are you doing? I have faith in you. What are you doing? Do it. Oh, goodness me. I'm here to change the country. Not me, no. So announced the Prime Minister. I'm here to change the country. Sir, I really think you should be here to improve the country. Wow, choking back tears, the Prime Minister of Australia, with so many other problems on his plate, has come forward with the words that will be those words we either vote for or reject at the referendum for the Aboriginal voice to Parliament. Oh yes, and not only Parliament, it's now clear it's the executive as well. What a crock of nonsense. This is not a simple question. It's a loaded question. These words have the ability to change this country as we know it, and not for the better. Or it hasn't been demonstrated for the better. We have an elaborate system of government in Australia and bureaucracy. In fact, we have too much government. These people are honestly setting us up for another layer of bureaucracy, Aboriginal bureaucracy, which, if I'm any judge, can't agree on anything, including the time of day. Yet they are going to be able to control the movement of all legislation in the federal parliament. On top of that, all the state governments, led by South Australia, as of yesterday, will have their own Aboriginal voices. Now, are we seriously going to let ourselves be hijacked? Our economy, our system of government, our very lives, without saying a word? If we do say a word, that word should be no. This whole thing is so outrageous and stupid as to be unbelievable. We all have the same voice. We all have it already. All Australians have, regardless of race or colour or creed, whether you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander or whatever. We all have that voice. Correctly, I think, probably, the white activists, rather than the Aboriginals, think that with just 3% of the population, they can change the entire country. And worse still, they think they should change the entire country. I do not know what the Aboriginals contribute to GDP. All I know is that they are given $35 billion a year that white people are not given. They have mining royalties on top of that, and normal welfare, of course. And for a population of 700,000 in the entire country, if you sit down and work it out, this is an income of about $1,200 a week for every man, woman, and Aboriginal child. So if you have an average three-bedroom home, three-bedroom house, where it's not uncommon to have 20 or 30 people living, that's a weekly income of $36,000. $36,000. Tax-free. The only problem the Aboriginals have is that they don't get the money. They don't get it. The Aboriginal industry, which I suspect has been imposed upon them by the white activists, they get it. Oh, yes. These lovely people never see the money. It's soaked up by the industry. Now, this is an indicator, I think, of where we're headed with this voice, this apartheid. It's an attempt at what they called in South Africa separate development. And you know what we thought of South Africa with apartheid. Separate development. It's all based on the colour of people's skin. Now that is racism. So it's outrageous and nonsensical. Aboriginal people have every opportunity that white people have. Sometimes they are more remotely located, but that I imagine would be out of choice. But there is education, there is health, welfare, every opportunity and more. Apart from the fact that this voice thing, I won't say will, I will say could, which introduces the business of risk. I'm kind of risk averse. It doesn't improve anyone's lot in life, black or white. It doesn't improve anything. Now we have to see that Aboriginal people get the money that is being provided for them. We've got to stop the lawlessness, we've got to stop the domestic violence, the drunkenness, and make sure that the children attend school. These are urgent things. But all those people standing up there behind the Prime Minister on that day as he held back his tears, nothing about these grassroots sort of problems. Nothing. They don't seem to have any desire to fix them. But you can't tell me that they don't know about them. It's a mystery to me. And speaking of the voice, could somebody tell me of one other country in the world where a similar proposition as the voice has been put forward, let alone got across the line? I've racked my brains and I've done a quick search and I can't see anything even remotely like it? And why won't the government release the Solicitor General's advice on the voice? The other thing is that whether it is judges, teachers, experts, constitutional lawyers, academics, intellectuals, theologians, journalists, everyone seems to have a different opinion, but no agreement on this voice. Now, if the experts, or the people who are trotted out as so-called experts, if they don't know or can't agree whether it is good or bad, a yes or a no, where does that leave us? Confused? Yes, confused. And I have a saying, I suppose, and that is, if in doubt, don't. But that could just be me, I suppose. Another question. What do we do with the some 100 separate organisations that are there and paid to be there to speak up for and act for Aboriginal people? Do we just go on paying them for nothing? Or do we sack them? Or do they become the voice? No, that's completely separate. Completely separate, I've already checked. Has anyone added up what all of this is going to cost and what the benefit will be for that cost? I know the referendum is going to cost about $100 million, but really the referendum itself is just really the tip of the iceberg. I don't know. I've got no real doubt that the Aboriginal people have been weaponised by the loony left. It's not their fault. Weaponised. It won't be the Aboriginals who will be using this voice, and it won't be the Aboriginals we're listening to speak using this voice. It will be the loony left, with more money, more power than they ever had before. And the Aboriginal people will be no better off. And neither will anyone else, of course. Seriously. Seriously, is anybody going to vote for that? I can't imagine that being the case. Tomorrow, and I don't want to spend, oh God, every program on the subject, but it is incredibly important. Jacinta Price, the senator from the Northern Territory, she sent Pete a letter some days ago. It was about the middle of last week, I think, wasn't it, Pete? Yeah. And but Pete doesn't know why Jacinta Price has just randomly sent Peter Clayton a letter, but she has. And I've got a copy of it, and I'll read it for you tomorrow, because it is most telling. Here is someone who knows her stuff, and someone who should be listened to on the subject. Thank you very much for viewing the Court of Public Opinion. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton and I'll be back tomorrow. Believe in yourself, and thank you for joining us in the Court of Public Opinion.